do. We're not. Bakht would see you now, Humaira. Just stay ready. Okay. So I was telling you about the experiential value of the grammatical features have. So in grammatical features, we need to analyze what structures do sentences have. If they are SVO, we are referring to an action. Okay. As there is an example in your book also on page number 121, people with the book. Reagan attacked Libya. Okay. I give you an example. Terrorist blew himself. Right. Another example from your book, South African police have burned down a black township. Okay, so this tells you about the action, what Reagan has done, what terrorists have done, what South African police has done. They have done some kind of an action, right? The second structure, SV, tells you about the event. Like I gave you example, New York has, Quetta has suffered, right? So that's some kind of an event that has taken place. Okay. Other examples are in your book also. Yes, madam, what you have written in the chat, you deserve that. Okay, as far as you know, events are concerned, Reagan was fishing. This is one of the example in your book. Okay, this is some kind of an event. A black township has been burned down. Many peasants have died. And SVC, this one tells you about some kind of an attribute. Like I gave you example, women are paid less. Many peasants are dead. Libya has oil. Reagan is dangerous. Okay, so it tells you some attribute about someone, right? So according to the structures, you can evaluate the experiential value of these grammatical feature. Other than that, within the same question, is the agency clear? At another point, he has talked about active and passive. Okay, and there you can also talk about if the agency is clear. This example is we have already done, and it's in some of the previous chapters. Quarry load shedding problem, unseated lorries from Middleborough Quarry were also causing problem by shedding stone. See, the agency is absent here. A non-living something, non-living thing, this is a vehicle, is said to be shedding some problem by throwing some stones on the way. So who is responsible? Is it the driver, or driver's irresponsibility on the part of the driver, or someone else in the business? We do not know who is doing that. Okay, but the problem is the agency is absent. The animate, the actual person who is responsible is absent, and someone else is there. The similar things happen when you use sentences in the passive voice. Okay, the guards were killed in the yesterday's attack. Okay, the guards were killed. Who killed them? The agency can be hidden also. Okay, the guards were killed by the terrorists, of course, but if the terrorists were killed by whom, but we do not know. If someone is killed, and there are chances that we can hide the agency, as we in the initial classes also discussed the case of Malik Riaz's daughters and his son-in-law, who were not named. Such sentences were used that they were not named in the media. So it really depends what kind of discourse someone wants to produce, and there is an option of hiding or revealing the agency. Agency means someone who was responsible, the actors. Okay, so this is the experiential value of grammatical features. Simon, do you want to say something? Do not catch me in grammar. I'm not really good at it. Okay, I know you are.
I am also not good at grammar. I was just saying that you say that according to the context, whether they want to name or they don't want to name someone. Like most of the time when the terrorists are killed, they never show their identity. But in yesterday's case, all of them were All of them were named, and even from the place where from where they belong to, they even mentioned that, just because
They
they want
wanted to,
to do
that's why.
something. Yes,
Perhaps
ma'am.
they wanted to. Yes,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
true. Okay. Other than that, within this grammatical part, we need to answer this question according to Fairclough. Are the processes what they seem? That means if the agency is not shown as analyst, as critical discourse analyst, we need to find out if they whatever we are being told is something being hidden. Are they trying to hide someone? Do they intentionally, like Simon has said, do they intentionally want to reveal some identities? Or maybe some, are they revealing some false identities of people, right? So are the processes what they seem apparently in the text, right? Are normalizations used? Normalization, what do you mean by normalization? Normalization are basically the way headlines are put. Okay, terrorist attack on stock market, this is normalization. Minimum use of words. Okay, so we need to see our normalizations used in the text. Okay, for instance, load shedding a problem, right? Instead of saying that people are facing load shedding problems for like a number of days, the news goes as extended hours of load shedding. Okay, right? The irresponsible attitude of K Electric. Okay, so nominalization, we need to look for what is being highlighted. Nominalization basically is used for highlighting things. Okay, we have, while we were doing it, whether the agency is revealed or not revealed, or intentionally revealed or intentionally hidden, our sentence is active or passive, right? Our sentence is positive or negative. Now, simply stating, vocabulary is positive, and when we talk about vocabulary, we are talking about negativity in the connotation of words. There are some positive words, there are some negative words. As I told you that they also, in FCDA class, bachelor is a positive word. Okay, it's feminine, spinster is not a positive word. Governor is a positive word, governess is not positive word. In terms of what? In terms of connotation, right? This is the negative and positive as far as vocabulary is concerned. But when we are talking about negative and positive uh, in grammatical terms, we mean negative sentences in which उसको क्या कहते हैं, negative particles are used. Does not, did not, has not, have not, all of this. So these are called as negative sentences, right? By connotation, they may be positive also. There were no terrorist attack. Now, this is a very positive sentence, but grammatically, it's negative because it uses a negative particle. Yes, Omera, do you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. Like in the word nurse is used positively for women, but the word nurse is used negatively for men. Men, mostly women are nurse, and mostly men are not nurse. So this word is also used in positive and negative context.
Not exactly. No. What I told you that most women and nurses are usually women. So when we have a male nurse, so when we have a man who is a nurse, we just add a male nurse. लेकिन नेगेटिव तो नहीं है. नेगेटिव प्रोफेशंस तो मतलब पाकिस्तान में है. नर्सिंग इज अ नेगेटिव प्रोफेशन. नेगेटिव इन द सेंस मतलब अपना परसेप्शन इज इन रियली गुड अबाउट इट. एयर होस्टेस अब वो नेगेटिव थोड़ी है. तो इट्स द वे यू परसीव प्रोफेशंस. वरना इन द वेस्ट nurses are more important than the doctors. Yes, Emma.
Ma'am, as Humaira said, that male nurse here is not showing something negative, but the nature of the nurses are mostly, they are someone who care, and the caring nature for women. When it comes to men, here they use the term men. Mostly such words are used for women, but here they just want to show that men are strong. This is again showing something negative for women.
That can be the case, right? So these are some of the sub questions that you answer when you are answering this main question. Okay, what experiential value do grammatical features have, right? So we answer all these sub questions as well, right? Now, talking about what relational value do grammatical features have, we need to analyze what modes are used, right? Now, when we talk about modes, we are talking about what kind of sentences are used. There are three kind of sentences. Okay, let's check your grammar. What are those three kind of sentences quickly on your chat, or maybe you can raise your hands also. What are the three kinds of sentences? यार इनमें ग्रामर भी सीडीए तो है ही खराब, ग्रामर भी खराब है. यस साइमा.
Ma'am, I don't know why I can't write in chat. That is why I'm time and again raising my hand. Ma'am, sentences are mostly negative, positive, and interrogative, and they can also, we can say that declarative, assertive, and many other types we can also discuss here.
Right, right. Yes, Umaira.
Ma'am, the three sentences, declarative, interrogative, affirmative, these are the sentences, and negative sentences.
Yes, right, right, right. Yes, Sadia, do you want to add something? We have got the right answers though. Okay, let's move on. Now, when we say that what modes are used, we are referring to the kind of sentences that are used. Of course, the kind of sentences have different implications. If there are more interrogative sentences, or there are more imperative sentences, or there are more declarative sentences. So if there are more declarative sentences, the discourse would be a neutral one. Okay, those would just be statements maybe. So if there are a lot of questions there, then they are evaluated and they are analyzed in a different way, right? Are there important features in relational modality? When we talk about relational modality, we are talking about modal auxiliaries. I think you know about modals: must, should, have. There are, I think, 7 or 8 kind of modals in English, right? So there's a difference that someone, it's written that this must be done, and this should be done, this ought to be done. So these are 3 different kind of modals that are used, right? 8 kinds of sentences hote hain, kinds of modals hote hain. Perhaps Naima has written for the modals, right? 8 kinds, 7, 8 kinds hote hain. Yes, ought, should, must, have, all of these. So these are called as causatives, right? So we need to look for the modals. It's called relational modality. B, you can say, and there are examples also in your book also, right? Your library books are overdue, and your library card may not, may, might, all of these are modals, not be used until they are returned. If the books are not returned within a fortnight, you must pay the cost of replacing them before you borrow more books. Okay, this is an example on page number 127 for the modals, right? Pronouns, of course, you know these pronouns are very, very important. CD, we and you, right? We shows solidarity. You shows division, right? So they have their own connotation, the pronouns. So we need to analyze and look for the pronouns also if they are in the text. What expressive value do grammatical features have? in this grammatical features, as far as these expressive values concerned, we talk about possibility. We again talk about the modals. Okay, possibility can be talked about like an example in your book: the bridge may collapse. This, there can be permission also. There can be um, obligation to, through must. The bridge must collapse under that weight. So expressive value of grammatical features more or less, deals with the permission, possibility, and obligation. Mm. And all of these three can be shown to the use of modal auxiliaries that we have already done in the relational value here also. Relational modality, and similar is the expressive modality also. Both are similar. Okay. And one more thing you need to remember, as I told you that he repeats that this is not a holy writ. At the same time, many of the things are overlapping here also, right? Like relational modality and expressive modality. You just need to figure out what kind of value you are looking for in this modal auxiliaries. Okay, and many of the things would be overlapping. For instance, this active passive thing, and when we talked about agency, whether the agency is present or whether the agency is not present, right? So things are overlapping also. That's why it is not necessary that you have all the elements that you're being told to in this framework. You will not, you might find few, you might not find few, or maybe you are able to find all these. Okay, how are simple sentences linked together? What logical connectors are used? Okay, now logical connectors are words like nevertheless, however. Okay, so words like the words that actually connect the sentences, the simple of the sentences, right? Nevertheless, however. What other logical connectors do we have in English? Anyone with grammar can help. Yes, Naima, what other logical connectors we have? Yes, anyhow, or okay, let's go to Humera. Yes, Humera, what are logical connectors?
Ma'am, like hence, even though, nevertheless,
Although,
in
okay,
addition to, these all are the logical
logical connectors,
connectors.
right, right. Yes, Amma,
And
what do
ma'am,
you want to say? Yes, Humera, do you want to say?
ma'am, one another word is used for this logical connectors, as we have studied in BS first semester. I just forgot that word. This is there is one another word which is used for this logical connectors.
वो नईमा को
Let me
आता
recall
होगा.
it, then I will. Yes, ma'am. ये नहीं मैंने लिखा है. I think this is transitional words. Transitional words, yeah.
अरे यार, सादिया बीच में आगे कंफ्यूज कर दी थी. कोहेजन नहीं होती है इसमें. This is something else. Yeah, furthermore is one of them. Okay. बीच में ऐसे
Yeah,
ट्रैक
furthermore
भाई
is in
नेगेटिव सेंटेंस
addition
थोड़ी
to
है.
and
Yes, Saima.
Yes, ma'am. Likewise, on the other hand, and similarly, on contrary, these all are also, we can say that transition word or logical connectors.
yeah.
Okay,
Whereas,
fine, fine. Yes, right. Then we also look for the subordinate and coordination. Coordination is using and while you are connecting two clauses, and subordination is the connection of two clauses through because. Okay. Maybe there are also other connectors also that joins two clauses in a way that one becomes the main clause, the other becomes the sub clause. Okay. Coordination is when you join two clauses through the word and. Okay, so you can also look for these, right? Yeah, but is also one of them. So how are these simple sentences connected? This is your 8th question. What interactional conventions are used? Here we go to our knowledge of pragmatics, where we would look at the turn takings, and we would look at the interruptions, and we would also look at some of the presuppositions too, right? So when we are talking about what interactional conventions are used, we are talking about the interaction that takes place. Okay, we talk about the turn taking, we talk about the we talk about interruptions also, we talk about presuppositions too, we talk about controlling the topics, we talk about occupying the floor, all of these, right? So interactional conventions, we go back to our pragmatic section of the discourse, right? What larger scale structures does the text have? Now, what larger scale means you can have instances like what happened actually, how do you describe larger picture, what happened? For instance, this is given, this is an example in your books also, an accident. How is it reported? What are the main elements? What happened? What caused it? What was done to deal with it? What more immediate effects it had? What longer term outcomes or consequences it had? So it gives you the larger picture of the discourse. Okay, how event took place, who were the participants, why did it happen? Now, all of these might not be there in the discourse, but you need to decipher them. ठीक है? अब जो कल का इंसिडेंट था, what caused it? Perhaps it was not in the discourse that we came across. What was done to deal with it? We know that. What more immediate effect it had? We do not know. What longer term outcomes or consequences it had? We can only, evaluate through the contextual knowledge. Okay, if we are talking about yesterday's incident or any incident for that matter, so we might know about the participants, whatever is apparently there in the discourse in the form of the text. We might not know all the details, but those details need to whose mic is on? The baby's crying.
Lalama's mic is on.
The mother is studying CD and the baby is crying on her behalf. The mother should be crying. Why is the baby so unhappy? Right? So these are the largest structures, the overall picture, basically. So few things would be given to you, few things you need to analyze through critical discourse analysis. Okay. So these are the 10 questions, right? These are the 10 questions, and here we are done with the descriptive part. Okay, the first level of this analysis is done. For examples and more details, you may read the chapter. Now we are moving towards the other two. Let me start sharing the slide. Do you have any questions related to this? Yes, exactly. It tells you about the implicit elements that you have to analyze to find out these elements to the explicit. What is explicitly given, you need to find out the implicit part of it. Okay, right? So these 10 questions actually covers the linguistic portion, the language portion. Humaira is raising her hand. Yes, Humaira.
Ma'am, as Naima said that in question number 10, we have to find out the implicit element. Ma'am, you said that for the larger scale, like we have to cover each and every detail of any incident. So I think we have to go through all the explicit element or implicit element. Ma'am, I think we have to go through the explicit element.
Explicit elements are what are available and visible to you in the discourse. ठीक है? तो यही तो CDA में find out करते what's not there. Okay, as I have given you an example of what happened yesterday, what we are told as what happened. What caused it, we do not know, right? We need to find it out through critically analyzing it, right? The people who are named for it, as Saima said, that the agency is revealed to us, they want to take us through what caused it intentionally. Okay, we should think what has caused it and what was done to deal with it. We know that, but what more immediate effect it had, we do not know. What longer term outcomes of it, we do not know. We only know what happened and what was done to deal with it. Two things in it. The rest of it is all implicit. We need to find out. Okay. Yes, Simon, do you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, as you are giving the example of yesterday's incident, we have to find out what was the presupposition. As we know the name of the participants and all, what was the cause behind which
Yes.
forces or compelled these young men to do so. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to do. We have to go through such things. Am I right, ma'am?
Yes. So we do not know. This is not mentioned in the discourses. The discourses that we come across through the media, this is not there. But if you can contextualize, of course, I told you that no context is, no discourse is out of context. If you will contextualize this discourse, you will find out all the answers of these questions somehow. Okay. But keeping in mind whether the news is true, whether the agency is intentionally revealed, whether it would be true or not, or what other purposes can be behind it, right? So critical discourse analysis covers this all, right? Now we are moving towards the interpretation and the explanation part, right? Now, Humaira, do you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we are done with this description value. So, ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if we are given with text, and we are
Mm-hmm.
asked to make the description of this particular text. So, ma'am, we have to write all these three values. We have to write all the grammar, vocabulary, and texture for this single text.
Okay. Now, basically, this is a whole framework. Description is just a part of the text. So whenever you would be given a text or you select a text for your research, you're going to apply Fairclough's three-dimensional framework, right? So you'll be applying three-dimensional. Description say, this remains incomplete because if Fairclough himself writes down that description needs to be complemented with interpretation and explanation. Without interpretation and explanation, your analysis is incomplete, basically. Okay, so you would never get a question to do the description part of a text. And if you have selected a discourse for analysis through this 3D model भी कहते हैं इसको, 3-dimensional model of Fairclough. So you would be applying all the three, then it would get completed. Okay. I've got a thesis also. One of my supervisee has done it. She chose the topic of FATA, I think, when FATA got separated from KPK. So she looked for the news in the, I think she worked on the editorials of 2 newspapers, and she compared the words and the grammar, how the discourse is covered about FATA in the two different newspapers. I think one was Dawn, the other was the Tribune. Right? Okay, so you will be working with all of these. Let me change your slides and then we get back to another chapter of interpretation and explanation. Here comes your screen. So we are doing critical discourse analysis. We are going to do this interpretation explanation. Position of the analyst. We have already talked about the subject position of the analyst also, and people who would be working for their presentation or enthusiast interpolation. They'll have some better idea of this. Anyway, what our focus is today is interpretation and explanation. Okay. Now, description needs to be complemented with interpretation and explanation. This is the answer to Mayor's question also. You will never get, from a sane teacher, you will never get a question like describing a discourse, okay? From a crazy teacher, you may get one question like that, right? Okay, now let's see what is description basically. How do you, oh, sorry, we are done with description, sorry. We're talking about interpretation. So in order to, Humera, do you want to say something? Okay, let me admit few more people. Okay, right. So in order to make the analysis of interpretation easier, we are dividing the interpretation into 6 steps. Okay, when you cover all of these steps, you cover your interpretation part, right? Now what you need to remember through your recall from the previous lectures about interpretation is MR. Okay, what is MR? Quickly go to your chats for the MR. What is MR? If you know the MR, things would be simpler for you. What is MR? MR भी तो ये है Fairclough की terminology है MR. अरे यार. Yes, this is a member resource. Okay, what is a member resource? MR is member resource. So my purpose of asking you is what is MR or member resource? हुमैरा भी आप भी फारिग हो चुकी हुमैरा. What is MR? Okay, if I give you a clue that for interpreting any discourse happening around us in our society, we take the help of MR. She's close, mental representation, or that is, you did not study at all. 6 months you have been sleeping. MR refers to member resource, which refers to your schema. अब schema का तो पता हो या नहीं पता? What is your schema, schemata? What is schema, schemata? Where is Uzma? Is Uzma here? Connected? Where is Uzma? Yes, Uzma. Uzma ने अपना mic ही off किया है. मतलब mic is absent. She doesn't want to talk today. ना mic होगा ना मैं answer करूँगी. As simple as that. What is schema? Yes, Saima. Saima the savior. Yes, Saima.
Member resources are when we talk about like a situation, who are the participants and who are, we can say that who are the listeners or what created the discourse, who are the participants and who are the, who can respond, what like object and subject of a discourse or context.
schema क्या होता है? No, you are not right this time. आपने क्लास को बचाने की बहुत कोशिश की लेकिन
मैं लग रहा है, मैं सोचती हूँ थोड़ा.
Okay, MR is member resource. Member resource is schema. Schema is your ठीक है, goal, relation, intention. Humera, what's wrong with you? सुबह के इंसिडेंट के बाद ये हाल हो गया. Anyway, a schema is your memory, okay, your previous memory. When you build certain kind of schema with the passage of time, as you spend your life, as you grow up, while living in a particular setup, in a society, in a tribe, in a family, right? So what happens is schema is your memory, and this schema helps you in understanding the discourses that are taking place at a particular time, in a particular context. You can contextualize. For instance, if I say that you have a CDA paper tomorrow, or if I say this to someone outside your class but in the English department, so they would know through their memory that there is some course which is called a CD and MPhil students are taking its paper, right? If this is told to someone who has no schema and no memory of courses or MPhil or English department, they would not be able to contextualize. I'm giving you the simplest of the example. Whatever happens, see, I just tell you that I need your presentation before Eid. Okay, so your schema would help you that some Muslim event is coming up, that I'm naming it. I have just named it. I have not given you any details about it. Okay, I have not even told you the date also, the Islamic date. But everything you can contextualize. You're able to understand the text because you have been seeing this happening, right? As a matter of your information is stored in the memory. Okay, so this MR is very important. This is the reason that if I give you some political text of, for instance, we know about the political scenario more or less of America, UK ka bhi, to an extent we know about Brexit too. So we keep our updated on some political issues of some popular countries, right? But if I give you a political discourse of, for instance, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, which are not in the news and we do not know much about these countries or these nations and people, you would not be able to understand the discourse. What is the reason of your failure to understand a particular discourse? It's because this is not a part of your schema. You have never heard about it. You have never experienced it. You have never seen it. You have never watched it. Okay. So MR is very important. So this stage of interpretation is actually concerned with participants' processes of text production as well as text interpretation. Okay, how a text is produced, in what circumstances, what situation, what participants, what time, what context, and text interpretation also, how it is being interpreted. As I told you that similar text or similar discourses can be produced differently. Similarly, interpretation of people can be different. Okay, that really depends about their experiences, their knowledge, their beliefs, all of these, right? If I give you example, if you remember this pandemic, when this pandemic arrived in Pakistan, there was much discussion about it on ethnic basis, if you remember. Okay, otherwise, if you logically think it was a pandemic, it had to go to every country, but it was associated with a particular ethnic group, and a particular ethnic group was targeted also and blamed for the pandemic in Pakistan, which happened to be really funny afterwards. But see how a discourse about pandemic was interpreted here, and how the discourse about pandemic was interpreted in China or in any other country, right? China actually, started researching, they started treating it immediately, and they spent a lot of money. And many of the countries we are seeing have overcome this pandemic. But you would see a very different kind of discourse going on related to this pandemic here. A strange kind of discourse, like doctors killing the patient, doctors selling the bodies. Okay, uh, I don't know how much truth there is in it, but there are really some funny discourses which are very different from the discourses on the same topic in different countries. So this is how you interpret it. Okay, how the discourses are being produced and how these are being interpreted. Simon, do you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, through this pandemic, Pakistan also wanted to show that how their ideology was strong and they were not wrong. That India and Pakistan are two different countries, and India is an enemy of Muslims. Like they show that they are only blaming Tabligis for this pandemic. On the other hand, the Pakistanis were doing the same here in Pakistan, but on the international media they were showing that Indians are targeting the Muslims. And what did the Pakistanis do? They made some few candles on the name of Arab prince and princesses and start criticizing Indians. And this is how they are using the discourse, producing the discourses to strong their ideologies.
Exactly. Right. So see, the topic is just similar. We talked about pandemic, the way we talked about pandemic, the way India would talked about pandemic, the way America and even America also produced some of the racist discourses you would have come across during this pandemic, right? Uh, many there were incidents where Chinese people were killed on the roads because they were thought to be spreading the disease, because the disease started with China and the president was a part of it. You can find such racist discourses within the presidential speeches that he made about corona, about this pandemic, COVID-19, right? Yes, Humera, do you want to say something? Yes, Humera.
America is responsible for this pandemic. And this discourse is also produced that America is responsible for this pandemic, as China, it is growing its economy. So America is being jealous from China. So the Americans are responsible. In the beginning, it was so, and then after when America, the cases becoming increasing day by day. So then this discourse it become diminished.
Yeah, there have been change in discourses also. America being responsible and then killing its own people, and then inventing some medicine which would be very, very expensive. So it was to boost the economy, but ironically, the economy suffered, and they say that we cannot get back to the same economy even in 10 years, right? So this is how, similar discourses, the production is really matters where they are produced by whom. Okay, and it really depends who are the interpreters of these discourses. So interpretations are generated through a combination of what is in the text and what is in interpreter's mind, what is his member resource, which he draws upon for this interpretation, right? So interpretation is really depends upon what is in the text and what is the member resource of the interpreter. Okay, two things formulate this interpretation: what is in the text, and again, interpretation deals with both the production and the interpretation itself. Okay, so it would see who is producing it, in what circumstances, what is the context, and then it also depends on the context of the interpreter, right? So there are some of the formal features of the text, and which there are some cues which activate your MR, right? So your MR is huge, your schema is huge, of course, and your uh, schema really depends on your exposure, on your readings, also on your belief systems too, your experiences. So a lot of things come together to make your schema. So whenever you get a clue, your mind takes help from a particular part of your schema. to interpret a certain kind of a discourse, right? So basically it's an interplay between cues, that is hints, and your MR. So we may refer to member resource as interpretive procedure. Okay, MR is your schema, MR is your background knowledge, and interpretation is basically a play between the cues that you get, the clues, cues, or hints that you get, and they play with your MR. So what part is driven for a particular kind of interpretation? Okay, and since our MR are different, and I told you that your MR, member resource, schema, or background knowledge has a lot to do with your readings, with your exposures, with your maybe education also, with your belief systems, sometimes your religion, your ethnic identities, your social identities, your circle of friends, a lot of things, come together to bring, to form your background knowledge through which you would interpret any kind of discourse. Okay. Now coming to, Fairclough has actually simplified uh, interpretation by dividing it into 6 stages. Okay. Number one is the situational context. Now, in the situational context, okay. Now, in the situational context, you talk about what's going on, who's involved, what is the relationship between the participants, and what is the role of language. Okay, what kind of language is being used among the participants in the discourse. So in the situational context, you answer 4 questions. What's going on overall? What's the scenario? Who are the people who are involved? Okay. Again, whether the agency is there or agency is not there, who is being highlighted and who is being uh, hidden there intentionally. In what relationships are the participants who are there in the discourse, internally and externally? Okay, and what is the role of the language, right? So now this situational context has to do with the physical situation also. Okay, the place of the discourse, the person who is producing the discourse, as I gave you the example of TV channels, right? So they work with their policies, so it's really important to know the physical situation of the discourse, of the participants also. For properties of the participant means who are these participants in the discourse. Then it depends on the MR also. What kind of cues do you get for interpretation? The representation of societal and institutional social orders, which allow you to ascribe situations. They are actually in a particular situational type, right? If you remember about the social orders and order of discourse, all of these, right? So if there is a discourse, for instance, there's a legal discourse. अभी जो हुआ था काजी ईसा का, the case he was fighting. So we know what would be the social order or order of discourse in a particular discourse type. So our MR would analyze it accordingly, right? Then in this situational context, we need to know what kind of discourse type it is, uske kya potential meanings ho sakte hain, right? What would be the situation in which the discourse is written? किस era में लिखा हुआ है? Is it an old discourse or is it a current discourse? What was the situation at that time? What is the situation now? Is the discourse still valid? Okay, so all of this you study in situational context. Other than that, you study the social order also, societal order or institutional order, or the institutional spaces that we have already talked about while we were doing the theoretical part of Fairclough, right? So then we come to intertextual context. Now, how many of you know about intertextuality? I probably must have referred to it. It is a significant topic in, you know, CDA. What is intertextuality? Yes, Sadia.
Ma'am, intertextuality is when we are taking old text or referencing from some old text into and adding it into the new text. When we are referring back some old text into the new text.
Okay. Yes, Ima.
Ma'am, quoting or giving references of, taking references from other text and mentioning them in other texts. Mostly it happens in fictional works, and sometimes we can notice them in non-fictional works as well. Like, ma'am, most of the times African writers quote Shakespeare. Like, there is a famous work of Shakespeare, Othello, and that Shakespeare represents how they respect blacks. But when the Africans write their post-colonial literature or counter-colonial literature, they quote Shakespeare, say that Othello, there wasn't any Othello. Othello was a lie. This we can say that is intertextuality.
Yes. Right. Now, it is not a matter of sometimes, it is always, intertextuality is always there, because we have already studied in the beginning classes that no text stand alone. Okay. Every text is connected to another text, right? Historically, sometimes literary, sometimes through figurative language. For instance, the famous dialogues of Hamlet, to be or not to be, you have seen in a number of texts. Okay, not just literary text, maybe sometimes in the political text also, sometimes in the legal text also, legal discourses. So every text, no text or discourse stand alone. They're always connected to the previous text. Okay. And as we keep on learning class after class, so all of them have some connection to the previous lectures, to the previous knowledge, to what we have learned, right? So basically, um, when participants in any discourse operate on the basis of assumptions about which previous series of discourses the current one is connected to, so there are assumptions that are determined, which can be taken as given in the sense of part of common experience, which can be alluded, which can be referred to, right? And this can be disagreed to, and so on. Again, the very recent discourse on attack on this share markets, what happened is the discourse is connected to many previous discourses also. There is intertextuality in them, right? For instance, whenever we talk about NAB, or we talk about Nawaz Sharif, or we talk about Muslim League, Noon, all these are interconnected discourses. Okay, all political discourses in Pakistan are intertext somewhere. They are linked to some other discourses, um, some of the previous discourses, or even to the religious discourses also, right? Yes, Sadaf is right. If you have not copy pasted, that's right. Now, see, now when we talk about the feminist discourses in Pakistan, so they take a lot from the religious discourses also. Whenever there are debates on feminism or feminist discourses, or this Aurat March, there is a lot of discussion, religious discussion coming, right? So religious discourses and these feminist discourses all are, get interlinked. So this is intertextuality basically. Okay, when the text allude to other text also, already established text or whatever, but whenever there is an allusion to another text, this is called as intertextuality. So what Fairclough believes is that if people have knowledge of other text also, right, if they are able to decipher the allusions within the text, and this also, of course, if you have a good MR, if you have a good MR, then only you can decipher the intertextuality within the discourses, what they are alluding to. You may agree to that, you may not agree to that, but and there are allusions, right? Then we have within intertextual, we have intertextual context also. Then there are presuppositions. Okay, presuppositions are also related to intertextuality basically, because they are referring to something that the author presupposes that the readers would already know. Okay, so those can be historical happenings also, or those can be contemporary happenings also, but these are presupposed that the author, the readers, or anyone who's interpreting the text would already know this, right? Now what happens is, yes, Humaira, do you want to say something, and then I would continue?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Humaira.
Ma'am, I want to give the example of intertextuality. Like in literature review, most of the time we are referencing other authors in order to give a strength to our work. So this is also one of the example of intertextuality, when we are referencing authors, other authors who have doing the same work in the context which we are highlighting. So it is also the example of intertextuality.
अच्छा, उसका जो है ना, as far as your literature review is concerned, उसकी referencing, you know, it's different because you allude and you explain. ठीक है, उसने ये कहा, he believes, the author believes, or he said, he declares. So you write down what he declared. We do not already know what the previous author had already declared. तो वो intertextuality इसलिए नहीं होती क्योंकि allusion is already explained, right? But the example that I gave you, to be or not to be, okay, if you ask me for a class and I am not really sure whether I would be able to conduct the class, I say to be or not to be, right? So I have not explained here that Hamlet said this in a Shakespearean play. Hamlet, the character Hamlet said this. See, I did not explain, I just uttered it to your question whether I would be conducting the class or not. So when the illusion is not explained but it is presupposed to be understood, that is perhaps intertextuality. इसमें तो literature review में you explain everything, you explain the previous work. We do not know. As a matter of, ये जो intertextuality होती है, it is related to presuppositions. Okay, so it is already assumed कि लोगों को पता होगा इतना. This is such a popular phrase, right? Like you know, in some of the legal discourses we discussed that when a woman is witness to some incident, we need two witnesses, which would be equal to one man witness, right? So in a legal discourse we are referring to a religious discourse. Okay, and similar is the case with the whatever debates are taking place. There are a number of presuppositions on the part of the author, who presupposes that the listeners or the readers would already know about this. ठीक है, अच्छा, ये हो गई एक बात. दूसरी बात ये है कि you know, there, as I told you, that interpretations would be different by different people. Okay, that really depends on the MR. But in CDA, Fairclough says that the interpretation of some powerful participant may be imposed upon the others. So having power means being able to determine presuppositions. Okay, so see, sometimes the situations are interpreted for us. For instance, the pandemic. So some people were trying to interpret how did pandemic enter Pakistan. So the stronger interpretation were actually imposed on the interpretation of the minority of people who had, I would say, some logical sense also. Okay, so see, interpretation also has, you know, power structures that get involved in it. Some people who are maybe more powerful, or they own the media, so they can change people's interpretation. As I gave you the example of raising of petrol prices. So what ARY did was to change the interpretation of the people, because people interpreted it as a failure of the government to fight the mafia, right? But ARY on its own tried to change the interpretation of this news for the people. Okay, successfully or unsuccessfully, that's another question, but it tried to change the interpretation basically. Yes, Humaira, what do you want to say? Man, do you want to say something? Okay, I think she's just raising her hand. Anyway,
Yes, ma'am.
there,
I want to say
okay,
something.
yes, yes, Amir.
Ma'am, for example, the Prime Minister Imran Khan famous discourse "Tabdili nahi aa rahi." This is also used in the other discourses as well, as like one of the anchors, she's saying that "Tabdili nahi aa rahi, tabdili aa nahi rahi, Punjab mein badi tabdili aayi." So it is an illusion. It is used by an anchor to refer to the famous discourse of Prime Minister. By embedding this new text, Punjab mein tabdili aa
Mm-hmm.
gayi, into a pre-existing text, that tabdili aa
Yes.
nahi rahi hai. So we can say that this is also intertextuality.
Uh-huh. Tabdili is, it's a strong text. I mean, it's a text in itself that becomes intertextual, and this is alluded in so many later on text on the social media also. We see that there are slogans related to tabdili, there are discourses related to tabdili. Sometimes tabdili is the topic of many of the editorials, so that's a famous kind of discourse. Tabdili itself is, it's a whole discourse in itself, I would say, right? So yes, it comes in intertextuality. Now, having said that, the interpretation, powerful people, powerful group of people, okay, they try to impose their interpretation on the people, okay. It's about, as Wendy says it and calls it changing of mind through ideologies, changing ideologies through changing of mind. So it's about changing people's mind through their interpretation so that we cannot interpret it in any other way. Okay. ये जो जितनी discussions in political shows होते हैं, they try to change your interpretation of what is happening. Okay. Now the finance minister tells you that we are out of debts or the economy is improving. So it's actually changing your interpretation of the ground realities of what you are actually observing. Okay, what you are observing is information these days. What you are observing is people losing their jobs. What you are observing is that the prices of everything is getting higher, but what the finance minister tells you that the economy is improving. Okay, they try to impose their interpretation because again, he is an expert, so people would believe him more. So he is actually a more powerful participant for interpreting the discourse, right? Media houses, so much money is invested in these media houses, so they play their part in changing your interpretation, right? Now, this presupposition is not there. We know that presupposition is not there within the text. Okay, this is an aspect of text producer, an interpretation of intertextual context. So presupposition lies with the author, what he wants the the readers to presuppose, right? So he actually sometimes impose the presupposition, even the presupposition on the readers, and there is an example of on page number 153 about it. Okay, please open your books to page number 153. Very quickly we would see what is being presupposed about a royal family. If you want me, I can change the slide also, because you would be, perhaps you are without books. Okay, here comes your slide, and we are looking at page number 153. Here, wasn't it a lovely day? And now that this discourse is, I would quickly tell you, it's about since this edition is very old, this is about the wedding of Prince Andrew with Sarah Ferguson. Okay, and the marriage did not last long, but it is about describing the wedding day. Okay, that people must have seen on their televisions, but this person is giving a lot of presuppositions and trying to strengthen his presuppositions. So what are the presuppositions here you would find? Just tell me the presuppositions fear on the part of the author. The sun came out, the colorful crowd gathered, all this. Quickly read this, and then we move on. And sometimes, presuppositions are taken as a matter of common sense also, that everyone would know. And this is one of these examples. Read? Okay, raise your hands when you're read. What are the rest of the people doing? Okay, Homer has read. Who else? यार तुम लोग ऑनलाइन होके गायब तो नहीं हो जाते? How do I know that you are there in the class? Anyway, your exam would tell me. Okay, let's take Humera first. Yes, Humera. Yes, Humera.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, in this text, you can say we have read about the Sarah and Andrew and the presupposition, which I have found in the third sentence, that making it a day to remember, means that this author, he presupposed that this is a day which would be remembered by many of people around us,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a day where the two, like Duchess and this prince, they are going to marry. And this is also one of the presupposition when he says that she has taken on as navy wife and royal duchess, yet still retain her own career. This is also presupposition. We know that how she can she will taken her role as a navy wife. This is also presupposition. And he also presupposed that there was like enchanting TV interview, that for these two, he for this prince and Duchess, he used the word enchanting TV interview. So he is also presupposing this thing, that their interview is enchanting. And surely that must be unique. And surely that must be unique. This is also presupposition. We, that we presuppose this thing, that this marriage would be unique, because this and it would be in a royal history.
Okay, fine. Yes, Sam, I would like you to, tell me an overall presupposition. What is the presupposition? What should be important for people?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Sam.
The importance of presupposition is that we should know what are the duties of a royal. In our Pakistani language, we can say that a royal bahu, and Prince Andrew's wife to be Sarah. Maybe from here it is shown that her career is completely different, and it also shows that how they will be committed to the future, and and this is also shown that mm, you know the duties of and the royal duties are completely different, and the bride Sarah, she must know all about, and we can presuppose that she has a completely different career, and we can presuppose that the duties of a royal duties are tough, and she has to maintain, or she has to be committed to the duties, and also she will continue her career.
Fine. Okay. Now, if we take just one powerful presupposition from this text is that an event of a royal family is of interest to the public. Okay. The presupposition is that all of the people in the UK, because a royal couple is getting married, so everyone would be happy about it, and everyone would be inquisitive how the ceremony would go on. So this is the strongest of the presupposition. So there might be people who might not be interested in the royal life. Okay, it's not applicable to everyone, but this is because it comes from the media, so they're imposing their interpretation, making the ceremony even more popular. Okay, if it would not be popular, they our media is trying to make it very, very popular, that people should be watching. Those who are not there in the ceremony, on two corners of the road, they should be watching it on television. Okay, Humaira, do you want to say something? Can we move forward? Yes, Humaira. Okay, right. Now, what else do we have in this intertextuality in presupposition? He has named three things here. Okay, let me change your slides. Here. Now, before we move to, surface utterances, we are still here in the intertextual context. Now, he named three things here in intertextual context. One is frame, script, and schemata. Let's talk about schemata, because we already know schemata is your background knowledge, basically. And these are the parts of your MR also. It constitutes your MR. Schema is the singular and schemata is the plural. Okay. So these are basically mental representations of a particular type of activity in terms of predictable elements. So it actually gives you sequence, right? Other than that, there is frame. Frame basically tells you about the topic or the subject matter. Okay, what actually happened, the frame, the topic, the subject matter, the referent. Okay, it talks about the processes also, and it talks about participants too. So basically, the subject matter, the actual subject matter of the text is your frame. Then the third thing is, script. Now, what is a script? A script is similar to discourse type, right? So people have a script for a doctor, for a patient, and for how a doctor and a patient can be expected to interact. Script जैसे ड्रामे का होता है ना कि this would happen after this and this would happen after this, right? So similarly is the case with a medical discourse or a discourse or a script between a patient and the doctor. The patient would go to the doctor would inquire about the condition, and then he would diagnose a disease and would prescribe medicine. This is the usual script between the doctor and the patient, right? In legal discourses or in courtroom discourses, there would be a judge and there would be lawyers and there would be witness and there would be the accused, right? And then we know how it would go on. So these are the script that we already know about certain discourse types, right? So what he says that for interpretation, when it comes to intertextual context, a person relies on the schemata, okay, the schema, which is a part of your MR, then the frame, the overall situation, the subject matter actually that is visible in the discourse, and the script, the discourse type from where the discourse have been is derived, discourse type the discourse has been derived from, right? So these are the three things that are part of intertextual context. Okay. Now, surface of utterance, he calls it as the first level of text interpretation. Uh, the process by which interpreters convert string of sounds, and it is related to, if I simply put it, it is related to phonology, and it is related to syntax. Okay. What are the words, what are the sounds that are constituted there? Excuse me. Right, what are the sound, what is the phonology, how different words are combined, what is the syntax of a particular discourse. So that also helps you in the interpretation. Now, surface of utterance happens to be the first level. Fairclough calls it the first level of interpretation. So you are only looking at what is visible. Now, a person who does not have eyes will not be able to interpret anything. Explicit at the surface level. So on the surface of utterance, we are only talking about the knowledge of the language. Okay, just mean you have phonology, grammar, vocabulary. We are only looking at the knowledge of the language. Okay, what you know about the language only, not what might be the implicit meaning of the language, right? Now, meaning of the utterance, which happens to be the second level of interpretation, is about assigning the meaning to constituent parts of the text, right? When you assign the meaning to the utterances, that is the stage of meaning of utterance. So here you actually draw from your semantic knowledge of the MR. Whatever knowledge you have about the vocabulary that you are reading in the text, you get it from your MR. Okay, the understanding of the vocabulary words, the meaning of the vocabulary words you get from you rely on your MR to understand what is written. Okay, so here in the meaning of the utterance, you also look at how the words are combined and what meaning would they give, right? For instance, whether the sentences are SVO or VSV or SVC. So you look at the grammatical information basically, and then you start finding out the implicit meaning to arrive at meaning of the whole proposition. What is the idea? What can be the implicit idea behind such a grammatical structure? Okay. इसमें जो है in meaning of the utterance में you also draw upon your pragmatic conventions, and this also comes from your MR, right? उसमें then you have your speech acts also. You may look for if the discourse is in the form of the dialogues, you can look for the turn taking, occupying of the floor, and interruptions too. So here you are drawing from the MR, right? As far as local coherence is concerned, local coherence refers to the collocation. Okay, this is the third level of interpretation, and it has to do with the collocation. What is the difference between collocation and connotation? Well, what's the difference between collocation and connotation? Collocation, connotation. यार ये तो undergrads को भी, even undergrads also know this collocation and connotation. What is collocation and connotation? Yes, Leila. Leila, Lenuma, Leluma, Maruf, Maria, Mevish. Naima is participating. Ruxana, Sadaf. Yes, guys, what is the difference between collocation and connotation? Collocation, connotation. Okay, collocation is how words go together, right? Which word can come with which other term? For instance, we talked about behaviors. Okay, so what can come with the behavior? My voice is not audible. Okay, is it audible now? Is my voice audible? Please raise your hands if my voice is audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, right. Humera, something is wrong at your end. Voice is audible. Okay,
It's audible.
right, right. Thank you. Now, Sobia, do you want to say something? Yes, Sobia. Do you want to say something, or you just saying my voice is audible?
Yes, ma'am. I said that your voice is audible.
Okay. So I was telling you about collocation and connotation. Collocation means how do words go together. For instance, if we use the word rotten, so what can we use with rotten? Rotten vegetables, rotten egg, but we cannot say rotten milk, right? So how would rotten go together? Guys, just wait. Okay, just okay. So collocation is what two three words can come together. As I given you the example of rotten. Rotten eggs can be rotten, vegetable can be rotten, but milk cannot be rotten. Okay, so this is collocation. Connotation is the implied meaning. What kind of connotation, whether it's a positive connotation or a negative connotation, the implied meaning of a word are called as connotation, right? So there are two things, connotation and collocation. So we were talking about local coherence. Local coherence has to do with the cohesion and collocation, right? Cohesion has to do with the cohesion. Okay, how do you differentiate between cohesion and coherence? Let's put it this way. Okay, just find out the difference between cohesion and coherence. Just write down the difference. I'm just coming back in 5 minutes, okay? Just write down the difference between these two, and I'll be back in a while. Okay, someone raising her hand. Yes, Sadia, do you want to answer the question, cohesion and coherence? Yes, Sadia.
Yes, ma'am, I wanted to answer. Cohesion is the idea when it is connected at a sentence level means we see the grammatical links between the sentences, and coherent is when there are logical links, when the sentences are connected logically, when they give us some useful meaning, and they are logically connected. So this is a difference, maybe.
Okay, right, you're right. Okay, keep putting your answers in the this chat section also. Anyway, let's quickly do that. Now, this local coherence has to do with the cohesion, okay, the grammatical links, right? And it has to do with the collocation also, okay? As far as text structure and point is concerned, basically interpretation of text structure is level 4 of interpretation, and we see how the whole text hangs together, and here we refers to the global coherence, right? So in text structure we look at coherence, in local coherence we look at cohesion, okay? And then the point is the overall summary of the whole discourse, okay? Point is the summary, uh, text structure is the overall coherence, and local coherence is basically cohesion and collocation, right? So I think and here we end the interpretation part. I would like you to read the explanation part, which we would be dealing in the next class, okay? So explanation part I'm giving you for the reading, and we would just do it very quickly through discussion in the next part, okay? So that's, I think, enough for today's lecture. We'll be meeting next time for your paper, okay? And next to next time we would be completing this section also. Yes, Simon, what do you want to say?
Ma'am, ma'am, our paper will be subjective or objective?
It would be subjective, okay? Your paper would be subjective. You would be given 3 to 5 hours to do that, and then you would be, through. And maybe we do this explanation before the paper so that the topic gets completed, okay? And then afterwards I will give you the paper, I'll go away, and then you can submit it online also, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Right. Okay, so that's all from here. So I'm stopping this recording here and